absolutely should have been.
Rini, you know I'm going to die on this hill. The disrespect of Jalen Hurts, y'all need to stop. Harry, y'all need to cut it out. This man was not healthy last year. I don't care what anybody tells me. I don't care what the Eagles say. He was not 100% healthy. And the same way I look at Joe Burrow, a guy that I'm very high, when he's not healthy, the Bengals are different. When he is healthy, he's an assassin. I think Jalen Hurts getting his team to a Super Bowl, you can't say that about a lot of quarterbacks on this list.
Well,
Harold.
And
Harold.
interestingly, Kmart, I mean, it's an interesting comparison you make because Burrow fully got the benefit of the doubt by remaining at number 2, despite a season in which he missed a lot of time because of injury, and even when he played wasn't quite as effective. And Jalen Hurts got no benefit of the doubt.
No benefit whatsoever.
And you know what this reminds me, it made me think of it, and Lewis, I brought this up yesterday. You know, the celebrity magazines where they say stars, they're just like us.
Like us.
This tells me executives, coaches, and scouts are just like us in the media. They fall in love one minute and they just completely move on in the next. A year ago at this time, Jalen Hurts was on a rocket ship to the moon, and he has a banged up year. The coaching staff is a catastrophe. Everything, and all of a sudden now, there's all these questions and he's not even in the top 10. Do you believe Jalen Hurts recaptures the magic this year, Lewis?
Yeah, I do. I do. I believe he has a chance, like if he can stay healthy, that right now the offensive line will be fine. It will be retooled and it will be back to where it needs to be. The running game will be explosive. The weaponry on the perimeter is unquestioned. You know that they've got nothing but ballers, and he is a highly motivated, intrinsically individual who hears all this nonsense that's being talked about him. And look, we're absolutely right. He was a series away from defeating the great Patrick Mahomes, if you want to go ahead and frame football games as quarterback versus quarterback. Joe Burrow was close, to winning a Super Bowl and beating Matthew Stafford, but Joe gets the benefit of the doubt and Jalen Hurts does not. You're right. It is very subjective, just like it's going to be when we talk about Josh Allen. People love to rip Josh Allen, absolutely rip him. And for what? Why do they? Because, look, executives are just like us, man. They have their biases, and they come out clearly in these kind of rankings.
I will get to Josh Allen in a minute, but here's what I'll say. The complication of this list, and look, Jeremy does a great job compiling it every year, and as I always say, God bless him because it gives us great stuff to talk about. But there isn't a consistent reason for choosing people. So if we're exclusively saying who had the 10 best seasons last year, then I would understand Jalen Hurts falling out of it. But there is no way in the world that you would take 10 quarterbacks on your team before you would take that guy. Would you agree with? There's no way in the world I'm taking 10 quarterbacks to be my guy before I'm taking Jalen Hurts.
Well, here's the thing about Jalen Hurts. Health played a major part in the decline last season, right? Because we know Jalen Hurts.
So did coaching, Harry. So did coaching.
Well, just let me finish, Greeny.
Yes.
I think him being a dual threat quarterback is based on his health. Also, I think one of the most disrespectful things a defense could do to you is blitz you over and over again and say, I know you don't have an answer. That's what happened to Jalen Hurts. Let's not forget the playoff game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Todd Bowles sent cover 0, which means I'm blitzing everyone. I'm leaving all my corners and safeties on the island, and we believe that you can't get it done in the pass game. That's one of the most disrespectful things you can do to a quarterback. So,
okay, that has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts, and that all has to do with the offensive identity as a whole and the play calling and the game planning. Like that to put that all on Jalen Hurts is insane. It's not like Jalen Hurts is just physically incapable of beating the blitz. Okay, this was the structure of the offense. Like, what are you talking about? And to say that it's so insulting, you want to use the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game? Like, what are you talking about? Jalen Hurts was injured. His knee was wrecked. He literally dislocated his finger the week before. And his number one target, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, A.J. Brown, was injured. Like, what are you talking about? Okay? That's just insane. And even Troy Aikman said repeatedly, and Joe Buck, that the Eagles as a whole had just given up, that they were just like, did not want to play. That he said that when they were talking to them pre-game, it was just, he never saw a more group of guys that were just like kind of ready to go home. So again, to try to put that on like, Jalen Hurts' lack of ability is just nonsense. And what makes Jalen Hurts special was not just his dual threat ability. It was an ability, without a doubt, and a tool in his toolbox, but But don't put Jalen Hurts in this box that the defining characteristic of him being a great quarterback is his ability to run, because it's just not true. It's just not true. He took over in games. He took over in the Super Bowl. And it wasn't just because of his legs, or when he did run, it wasn't because he's ripping off 20, 30, 40-yard runs like a Lamar Jackson. Sure, it's his ability to move around in the pocket and escape and pick up some gains. Absolutely. But let's not act like he was a Lamar Jackson level runner so that when you take away his ability to run, you're just like, well, I don't know if he's great anymore. Because that's just not true. Go watch replays of him throwing. He is a top thrower of the football. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I just reject that wholeheartedly. Like, it's such a nonsense narrative to be like, well, they blitz against him all the time. How insulting is that? That's more insulting to the coordinator more than anything, because it's like, I know you can't dial up anything out of this. I know that you leave your quarterback on an island right now. I know that you have left your offense ill-prepared to deal with this. What do you want Jalen Hurts to do in that regard? That's why we see when teams don't have a good offensive line and then the coach can't do anything about it at that point, the quarterback is running for their life. I mean, in a nutshell, that's essentially the same thing. Right? Was anyone like insulted that they blitzed and took Patrick Mahomes' head off when he didn't have his offensive line? Did they blame Patrick Mahomes? No, they said he doesn't have a good offensive line. They didn't say how insulting it is that Patrick Mahomes can't overcome the lack of his offensive line. They didn't say that at all. But then they're using like the same flavor of that against Jalen Hurts. It makes no sense to me. And I do think it's a very interesting point that they bring up as to why some of these other quarterbacks get the benefit of the doubt. Like, why is it that Joe Burrow got crowned and has remained crowned even though he's had multiple inconsistent seasons, obviously multiple injured seasons, and even in the Super Bowl, he didn't even play that great. He didn't play elite. He didn't play anywhere near as amazing as Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had one of the best, statistically, no ifs, ands, or buts, one of the best Super Bowl performances of all time. No question about it. Not even an opinion. It's a literal fact. Joe Burrow doesn't have that. And yet Joe Burrow is given the benefit of the doubt. Now, again, to be clear, I think Joe Burrow is an unbelievable quarterback. So I'm not trying to say that Jalen Hurts should be there and Joe Burrow should not. But it is always interesting, and I always talk about these types of things, that when we apply certain criteria and variables, that we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent about it. We can't say 1 + 1 = 2 over here, but then when we're talking about someone else, we're saying 1 + 1 = 11. That's not the way it works, but in sports media, just honestly any type of media, political, whatever, they always do that. They always want to change the rules of the game. And it doesn't really make sense to me. Again, if you want to argue that Jalen Hurts is not a top 10 quarterback, that's fine, but you have to give me better reasons than, well, he's had, an inconsistent career, because it's just like, that doesn't even necessarily hold up to scrutiny. Because we also put, what's his name? Oh my God, his name, Justin Herbert up there, who arguably only had one great year, which again, I'm a huge Justin Herbert fan as well. And I think he is elite. So I know my reasons why, but if we say Jalen Hurts only had one good year, why do we not offer that same type of criticism for Justin Herbert? Right? Like, what are we seeing? So that's why it's not a justifiable reason. If you want to say, I believe Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, and these are the reasons why, give them to me. But you can't just say, well, because Jalen Hurts only had one good year. That's my issue with all of these types of arguments. And again, let's look what Jalen Hurts has been able to do, okay? Because when he was a starter, and especially when Shane Steichen took over the play calling, he got a non-stacked roster into the playoffs. That's impressive. He then got this next season, in 22, he took them to the Super Bowl and was going to be the MVP until he got injured. That's pretty impressive. Then played one of the greatest Super Bowls ever of any quarterback. That's pretty impressive. And then the following year was obviously injured, clearly injured, and had terrible coaches, and yet was still able to get that team into the playoffs and have one of the best starts in an NFL season. Well, they 10-1, I forget at this point now, 11-1, 10-1, whatever it was. That's pretty remarkable to be able to do. So it's just like, why are those benefit of doubts not given to Jalen? Why is that not seen as impressive? It doesn't make sense to me. The coaching was a disaster. Jalen's knee was wrecked, and it's just like you're expecting him to be even better than he was. I don't understand. Like, they were expecting him just to be able to like win a Super Bowl, and then that would have been impressive enough. So I don't understand why we give the benefit of doubt to some players and why we don't to others. It doesn't make sense. And like Lewis said, how they rip Joe Burrow. Like, so it is funny because even when we say they, it is kind of funny because there's always different groups of they, right? It's the Josh Allen fans, they. The Josh Allen haters, they. The Jalen Hurts fans, they. The Jalen Hurts haters, they. Right? Like, so it is always interesting when we say, like, they do this, they do that. And it's like, well, which they are we talking about now? Are we talking about the media? Are we talking about the fans? Because when we talk about the fans are always divided because everyone has their own, who they love and who they hate. So, but it does seem like, at least publicly, recently, Jalen Hurts has definitely not been given the benefit of the doubt. And it is curious because why don't we see, people say the same thing about a Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow better have a great season this season. Otherwise, he's going to fall from the top 10. Right? Like, why don't people ever say that? Why are people saying Justin Herbert better show up with Harbaugh? I think part of it is because they see the Eagles having such a great roster and a great franchise, so they're not given the benefit of the doubt as much, or they're not given grace for maybe some failures. We look at the Bengals as not being a highly run franchise. We know the issues with the Chargers, so we're like a little bit more forgiving for that. But like, I don't know, does anyone believe that Nick Sirianni is a top coach in the NFL? Nick Sirianni got fired. Nick Sirianni was fired last season. Was anyone going to hire him in the NFL for this season? No, not one team would have hired Nick Sirianni. So like, again, he's also overcoming like a not great head coach. So yeah, it's just, it's that conversation will always interest me as to how people's minds work and why they give benefit of doubts, why they elevate, why they pull someone back. You got to be consistent. It's so easy to be inconsistent in this regard, and you got to figure out, what is the criteria. And like, whatever her name is, Kimberly Martin, I guess, where she's like, it's all subjective. It's all subjective. Yes, that's true. But that's sports in a nutshell. Like, all of these things are subjective. So that can't be your argument. You can't just be like, it's subjective. Well, thank you. Under that logic, then none of us should be saying anything. Right? Where like, it's like it's got to be a bridge between subjectivity and objectivity, right? Like, you gotta find that bridge. So I reject the notion that you just say it's subjective. Like, okay, sure, but there's fundamental reasons why things exist. Even finding someone attractive, if you think that person is really good looking, yes, it's my subjective opinion, but it's also based off of an objective reality that they have nice hair, nice eyes, nice lips, nice whatever. They have good proportions. They're symmetrical. Like, there's actual objective reasons. And I think we sometimes lose sight of that when trying to discuss some of these random lists or who's good, who's not, and what forth. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think Jalen Hurts should have been ranked top 10? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.